Welcome, dear listener. Welcome to another quiet journey. Wherever you are tonight, this moment belongs to you. Perhaps you are lying in your bed, the pillow cool beneath your cheek. Perhaps you are listening in a distant city, where the streets outside are still awake. Perhaps you are somewhere quieter, a countryside where the air itself is already folded into silence. Wherever you are safe. You are here. And you may set the burdens of your day gently down. Take a slow breath. Feel it rise. Feel it fall. Let your shoulders soften, your jaw loosen, your hands grow heavy where they rest. You have done enough for today. The world can wait outside the door. This hour is yours. If these calm journeys bring you peace, if they help your eyes grow heavy, if they let you drift more easily into sleep, I ask you now, while you are still awake, to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It is a small act, but it helps us keep these journeys alive, like an echo carrying across old stone corridors. And I would love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Is it a quiet bedroom, curtains drawn, the steady hum of a fan nearby? Is it a corner of a city apartment, where the glow of street lamps sneaks through the blinds? Is it perhaps outdoors, under the open sky, where the air itself feels like a blanket? Wherever it is, share it if you wish, so others who listen may know they are not alone in the night. The night is here, and you are safe. You may release the day. Its weight, its worries, its noise. Let them fall from your shoulders as easily as a coat slipping to the floor. Let your body rest against the surface beneath you. Let your breathing find its rhythm. The world has no need of you right now. This hour is for quiet. This hour is for rest. If your boss gives you a hard time, be glad he isn't a pharaoh. For in ancient Egypt, the line between manager and master was much thinner. And disobedience was not met with a warning, but with silence, exile, or worse. If you are restless now, if your shoulders are still heavy with the weight of today, you would not have lasted long in the court of kings. So let it go. Breathe deeply. And allow yourself to leave this modern world behind, just for a while. Tonight, we will walk among stones. Stones that are more than walls, more than roofs, more than shelter. Stones that carry memory. Stones that declare authority. Stones that whisper the story of power in silence. Architecture has always been more than building. It is power written in form. A column reaching upward is a gesture of ambition. A wall encircling a city is a sentence of control. A temple raised on high is a promise of eternity. And though kings and empires have fallen, their buildings remain. Still breathing, still teaching, still commanding respect. Listen, if you can, to the ambience around you. Perhaps you hear the faint hum of a fan. Perhaps the murmur of distant traffic. Perhaps only silence. Now imagine, layered over that quiet, the sound of stone. The hush of air moving between pillars. the faint echo of footsteps across marble, the sigh of wind through ruined arches that have stood for centuries. This is where we sit tonight, among structures that do not speak in words, but whose silence is louder than any voice. You will not need to move. You will not need to open your eyes. All that is required is your stillness. I will guide you, gently, through a story told not by people but by buildings. From the first stones raised by human hands to the towering glass of modern skylines, architecture has been more than design. It has been declaration. And together, we will walk slowly, quietly, through these monuments, letting them whisper their lessons, one by one. The fire glows softly. Imagine it now. Not a blaze, not a roar. Only a steady flame, candle-like, flickering against walls that have watched centuries pass. The night stretches wide. But here, in this quiet, we will be still. For a little while, the noise of the world may wait outside. Here, history becomes more than names and dates. It becomes a companion. A place you can walk through, slowly, gently, as though you were there. Architecture is the stage on which power has always performed. And tonight, we will wander through that stage. Not hurried, not searching for fact alone, but drifting, resting, listening. Let the stones speak. Let the arches breathe. Let the spires stretch above you like long, slow thoughts. And as they do, you may feel yourself growing heavier, calmer, quieter. Sleep is welcome here. If your eyes close, let them. If your thoughts drift, let them. The story will continue without you, and you may return to it whenever you wish. So now, dear listener, as your breath steadies, as your mind softens, as your eyes grow heavy with the weight of quiet, we begin. Architecture began as shelter. A roof against rain, a wall against wind, a hearth against the dark. But from the earliest stones raised upright, from the first lines drawn upon earth with intention, architecture became something more. It became language. A language written not with ink, but with stone and timber, with brick and marble, with spire and arch. Buildings began to speak. And what they spoke, again and again, was power. A hut can protect, but a temple proclaims. A tent can hold a family, but a palace announces a dynasty. A fence can mark a boundary, but a wall encircling a city declares sovereignty. From the first great structures onward, architecture became a visible declaration of order, authority, and control. To step into a building was to step into someone's vision of the world. Temples were among the earliest forms of this speech. Raised high above the plain, lifted on stepped platforms or carved from mountain rock, they told every passerby, here is where the human and the divine meet. The scale mattered. To climb stair after stair was to be humbled before entering the sacred. To stand beneath a roof raised higher than the trees was to feel oneself small, and the gods large. Architecture made belief visible, and in doing so, it made rulers legitimate. As cities grew, their walls carried meaning too. A wall was not simply defense. It was a message. It said, within this boundary lies a people, protected, united, distinct. To build in stone rather than mud, to raise towers at the corners, to cut gates that could swallow entire caravans, was to show wealth, labor, permanence. And permanence was power. The very fact that such structures remained long after rulers died was the point. Authority written in paper could burn. Authority written in stone could outlast centuries. Architecture also organized life. Markets were placed in squares, courts in halls, rulers in palaces. The design of these spaces was not neutral. The wide, paved avenue led the eye to the temple. The colonnade directed footsteps toward the forum. The stairway lifted the body toward the throne. Through space itself, power instructed obedience. The body was guided before the mind even considered resistance. This was perhaps the most subtle lesson of architecture. It shaped not only the skyline, but the very movements of those who walked beneath it. To pass through narrow gates one at a time was to learn hierarchy. To stand in vast courtyards among thousands was to feel oneself a single part of a greater whole. To lift one's eyes to high arches and domes was to practice submission without command. Stone taught, silently. Power also learned that beauty could persuade. Symmetry, proportion, harmony. These were not only aesthetic values. They were arguments. A building whose columns stood evenly, whose roof aligned perfectly with horizon or star, declared a kind of cosmic agreement. It suggested that the ruler who ordered it was in tune with larger truths. That the kingdom, like the building, was balanced, proportioned, eternal. Architecture spoke across time. When a successor built in the same style, he declared continuity. When a conqueror built over the ruins of another, he declared dominance. When a new people reused the stones of an old temple, turning shrine into fortress or church into mosque, they declared inheritance. Each stone was sentence, each arch paragraph, each city an entire volume. And within those volumes, the story of power was always being rewritten. Consider the way architecture dwarfs the human form. A man is but 2 meters tall. A woman, a little less. Yet temples rose 30 meters, 50 meters, 100. Domes stretched above like new skies. Pyramids mounted higher than mountains nearby. Columns thick as trees carried roofs that seemed impossible to lift. The message was simple. You are small. Power is vast. You will pass. Power will remain. Even ruins keep this voice. A broken column still stands taller than the passerby. A shattered arch still frames the sky in measured curve. A fallen wall, even when covered with moss, still whispers of boundaries, of belonging, of control. Architecture, unlike speech, does not fall silent when the speaker dies. It continues to speak, in stone, in shadow, in memory. And so, from the first temples to modern skyscrapers, architecture has always been declaration. Sometimes gentle, in gardens that whisper harmony. Sometimes fierce, in fortresses that bristle against horizon. Sometimes dazzling, in palaces that glitter with wealth. Sometimes humble, in shrines that draw power from simplicity. But always, in some form, architecture has spoken of power. The language of stone is slower than speech. But it is also harder to forget. This is why kings and queens, emperors and priests, pharaohs and presidents alike, have always turned to architecture. Because armies march and then vanish. Because laws are written and then rewritten. But buildings remain. Even when abandoned. Even when ruined. They remain. And as they remain, they continue to whisper power. Thus architecture became more than shelter. It became memory. It became declaration. It became authority made visible. The first temples, the first walls, the first columns, all carried meanings far beyond their practical use. And those meanings still surround us. For to walk a city today is to walk through centuries of whispers. To live among buildings is to live among monuments of power, whether or not we notice. On the edge of the desert, where green fields end and sand begins, rise shapes so vast that even silence seems small beside them. The pyramids. Their sides cut against the horizon with such precision that dawn and dusk seem to pause when light touches their faces. They are not ruins hidden in forest. They are not fragile remnants tucked away in shadow. They stand in plain sight, visible for miles, undeniable in form. And from the moment they were built, they were more than tombs. They were declarations. The pharaoh was not merely a man. He was a god upon earth. His life bound to the Nile, his breath tied to the sky, his reign woven into the cycles of creation itself. But even gods who walk must one day lie down. And so the pyramid was raised, not only to house the pharaoh's body, but to announce his eternity. Geometry became theology. Four sides leaning inward to a single point, touching earth with wide foundation and sky with sharp summit. The pyramid was earth reaching upward, heaven leaning downward, meeting in a monument that declared, "Here, divinity rests. And here, divinity remains." The labor itself was part of the message. Tens of thousands of workers, season after season, year after year, shaping blocks, dragging them, lifting them. Stone by stone, the pharaoh's command was carved into landscape. Each block an act of obedience. Each wall a chapter of loyalty. The scale told the people, "Your ruler commands not only men, but time itself." For no single generation could build so vast without faith that their children would continue the work. And so power was extended through lineage, written not only in blood but in stone. The Great Pyramid at Giza, built for Khufu, remains one of the most astonishing feats of human will. More than 2 million blocks, each weighing tons, raised into precise order. Its base measures so carefully that sides differ by less than the length of a hand. For centuries it stood as the tallest human-made structure on Earth. But beyond height and measure, it carried meaning. Its sheer size silenced doubt. Its endurance promised eternity. Even as sandstorms swept the land, even as dynasties changed, the pyramid stood, saying in its silence, "Power can be permanent." Inside, passages wound upward and downward. Chambers lined with polished stone. But the true chamber was less important than the fact that it existed at all. The pharaoh's body was only one occupant. The pyramid itself was the larger tomb, the larger statement. The structure did not merely hold the king. It transformed him. Within its angles, within its geometry, within its sheer immensity, the pharaoh's mortality dissolved into monument. He was no longer man. He was eternity. The pyramid also spoke to the heavens. Its sides aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal directions. Its shafts pointed toward stars considered gateways to the divine. Astronomy and architecture joined hands. The pyramid was not only a tomb. It was a map. A cosmic diagram built in limestone. Each alignment said, "This ruler belongs not only to Earth, but to the eternal rhythm above." For the people who lived beneath their shadow, the pyramids were constant reminder. At sunrise, stone glowed golden. At midday, it shone white against the sky. At dusk, it fell into shadow but never disappeared. Fields were plowed in sight of them. Markets traded in their shade. Children grew up seeing them each day, learning that their king was more than man, that their land was more than soil, that their world was eternal. Power does not always need words. Sometimes power is stone, unmoving, undeniable. Other civilizations built monuments. But the pyramids were something different. Not only high, not only large, but geometrically absolute. The triangle, the line, the point. Each shape carried meaning beyond culture. Even those who came later, who no longer believed in the pharaoh's divinity, could not help but feel awe before them. And awe itself is power. Through the centuries, the pyramids outlasted kingdoms. Persian conquerors came and went. Greek philosophers studied and speculated. Roman generals passed by in wonder. The pyramids remained. When cities fell to ruin, when palaces crumbled, the pyramids still cut their clean lines against the horizon. As if to say, rulers come and go. Power remains in stone. Even in ruin, they command. Their smooth casing stones mostly gone, their summits weathered, their chambers robbed. Still they dominate the desert. Still they remind humanity that architecture can outlast ambition, that form can outlive name. We do not remember Khufu's voice. We do not know his laugh, his sorrows, his hopes. But we remember his pyramid. And in remembering, we remember his power. The pyramids also reveal something else about architecture's role in history. That power is never content with invisibility. It must be seen. The pharaoh might have been buried in a hidden cave, safe from thieves, safe from storm. But such a cave would not have spoken to the people. The pyramid, on the other hand, shouted without sound. It declared in every direction, "Here is greatness, here is divinity, here is eternity." Even the risk of robbery could not outweigh the value of visibility. Because power unseen is power diminished. And so, across ages, the pyramids have stood not merely as tombs but as teachers. They remind us that architecture, when raised to its highest purpose, is not utility. It is statement. That the stone which shelters may also command. That the wall which protects may also proclaim. That the building itself may be the loudest voice of all. The desert winds still move. Sand still drifts across their base. The Nile still rises and falls as it did when the first stone was laid. And yet the pyramids remain, their silence louder than any proclamation, their endurance stronger than any army. Power written in stone. And stone that continues to speak. Long before pyramids gleamed in desert sun, in the fertile valleys between the Tigris and the Euphrates, other monuments rose. Not smooth-sided, not polished in marble, but layered, stepped, stacked like mountains built by hand. The ziggurats. Their outlines still rise from the soil of Mesopotamia, even in ruin. Heavy platforms of brick, tier upon tier, reaching upward toward the heavens. To climb their stairways was to climb not only stone but meaning. For these were not merely buildings. They were ladders of power, binding earth to sky, man to God, ruler to divine authority. A ziggurat began as a platform. A temple raised higher than surrounding houses, lifted above market and street, announcing itself to every eye. As centuries passed, the platforms multiplied. One stacked upon another, rising in steps, each narrower, each higher, until the summit carried the shrine of the god. The people below did not enter this summit. It was reserved for priests, for rituals, for offerings. The climb itself was ritual. Step after step upward, leaving the ordinary world, rising toward the extraordinary. The materials were humble. Sun-dried brick, bitumen mortar, reed mats pressed between layers. But the scale was not humble. Even in ruin, the base of York's great ziggurat stretches broad enough to hold a village. In their prime, these structures dominated horizons. Farmers ploughing fields looked up and saw them. Merchants leading donkeys along roads measured distance by their silhouette. They were mountains in flat lands. And mountains, in every culture, were seats of gods. By building them, humans made divine geography from human labor. For rulers, the ziggurat was proof of legitimacy. Kings declared themselves chosen by gods, and the ziggurat was the stage for that claim. To rebuild a ziggurat was to renew favor. To let bricks rise again was to let order rise again. The tower was not only for the god above. It was for the people below. They saw its bulk, they saw the priests ascend, they saw offerings vanish into chambers unseen. And they believed. Belief was power. And architecture was the tool that made belief visible. Climbing a ziggurat was both physical and spiritual. The long ramps and staircases forced breath to slow, feet to ache, heads to lift toward the sky. By the time a priest reached the summit, he was no longer in the market's dust. He was high above it, face turned upward, hands lifted to the horizon. The architecture itself transformed the act of worship. The god had not changed. The priest had. And with him, the city felt its bond to heaven renewed. Ziggurats also told time. Their shadows stretched across fields, marking hours. Their heights framed the rising of stars, guiding calendars. Atop their summits, priests watched the heavens, reading eclipses, recording movements, learning the slow arithmetic of the sky. Thus, ziggurats became not only ladders of worship but observatories of order. The architecture of power was also the architecture of knowledge. The story of Babel, remembered in Scripture, tells of a tower raised to reach the heavens. Whether myth or memory, it captures the essence of the ziggurat. That these towers were not simply temples, but ambitions. Ambition to connect heaven and earth. Ambition to make a city eternal by binding it to the eternal above. The tale warns of pride. But the ruins remind us of power. Even in ruin, their bulk is undeniable. Their silence heavy. Their meaning persistent. Imagine the city of yore at its height. The Euphrates flowing nearby. Canals feeding fields. Houses of mud brick clustered together. Above them all, the great ziggurat. Tier upon tier rising. Its steps broad enough for processions, its summit crowned with shrine, its bricks shining in morning sun. The people below did not need to ask who ruled. The ziggurat told them. Kings passed, dynasties shifted. But the tower, massive and unyielding, kept its place. It said what no proclamation could say: order here is not temporary. It is cosmic. Architecture taught without words. To see a ziggurat was to feel scale. To climb it was to feel separation from ordinary life. To worship at its base was to accept hierarchy, to understand that gods were above, priests were nearer, kings were chosen. Every step of its form was lesson. Every brick laid was declaration. Even now, their ruins breathe this lesson. Though worn, though broken, their outlines still reach upward. The desert has not swallowed them. Time has not erased them. Because ziggurats were more than shelter. They were speech carved in mud brick. They were ladders that said, power comes from above. And by building them, rulers claimed to hold that ladder in their hands. Thus, the ziggurat stands as one of architecture's first full sentences in the language of power. Not merely a building. Not merely a shrine. But a world view, written in tier and stair, shadow and stone. From their platforms, kings ruled. From their summits, priests prayed. From their silhouette, people learned obedience. And long after voices faded, the architecture still spoke. Power declared in brick. Power repeated in form. Power written high against the sky. Before marble temples, before pyramids in deserts, before ziggurats lifted priests toward the sky, there were circles of stone. Stones taller than men, heavier than herds, placed upright in deliberate shapes across landscapes where people gathered. Stonehenge is the most famous. A ring of giant stones on the plains of southern Britain. But it is not alone. Across Europe, across the islands of the Atlantic, across valleys where communities once met, stones were raised, aligned, arranged. They are monuments from a time when writing was scarce, when kings were few, when power was not yet declared in palaces. But still, power breathed in stone. At Stonehenge, the stones stand in circles and horseshoes, their tops joined with lintels, their shadows cast long across grass. No wall encloses them. No roof covers them. Yet they hold space with as much authority as any castle. The stones speak not by protecting or sheltering, but by commanding awe. Why are they here? Why in this shape? Why in this alignment? Questions become power when no easy answer follows. Mystery itself is authority. When a people gather before a monument they cannot fully explain, they feel small before it. That smallness is not humiliation. It is reverence. Stonehenge aligns with solstices. At midsummer dawn, the sun rises through its doorway. At midwinter sunset, the light falls between its uprights. The stones do not move, but the heavens move around them. And in that pairing of permanence and cycle, people learn to mark time. The monument became calendar, temple, story. But the stones also did something else. They created center. A circle of stone is not only a shape. It is a gathering. Communities walked for miles to meet there. Rituals unfolded there. Feasts were shared there. The monument declared, "Here is where the sacred is. Here is where we belong." Even if rulers were absent, the stones themselves ruled. Their endurance spoke longer than any leader's lifetime. Transporting such stones was itself an act of power. The blue stones of Stonehenge came from mountains in Wales, carried over rivers and land for hundreds of miles. Why move them so far? Why labor so intensely? Because the act itself declared meaning. The journey of the stone was ritual. The placement of the stone was proclamation. Communities were told, by effort itself, this place matters. This circle is sacred. This alignment holds truth. Elsewhere, long barrows stretched across hills. Dolmens lifted capstones over tombs. Menhirs, single standing stones, marked fields and horizons. Each one was more than a marker. It was presence. A standing stone did not need inscription. Its very standing was enough. It said, "Here is memory. Here is the boundary between ordinary and extraordinary." For those who lived near, it was a reminder. For those who traveled past, it was a warning or a welcome. Stone did not vanish like words in air. It endured. And endurance is power. The mystery of early monuments was not weakness. It was strength. Power that cannot be explained completely is power that cannot be easily denied. Even now, scholars debate. Were the stones temples to the sun? Were they observatories of the sky? Were they tombs? Were they stages for ritual drama? Perhaps they were all. Perhaps their very ambiguity was their greatest strength. Because ambiguity demands reverence. Because to stand before mystery is to acknowledge something greater. For those who gathered there thousands of years ago, the stones must have felt alive. They caught sunrise. They framed sunset. They swallowed shadow. At night, under stars, their silhouettes turned sky into stage. A fire lit in the circle transformed stones into guardians. A chant between them became echo. The architecture was not only physical. It was emotional. It was psychological. It made people feel. And in feeling, they believed. Later civilizations built higher, built brighter, but never fully left behind this lesson. That awe is power. That arrangement itself is meaning. That even without roof or wall, architecture can control the heart. Stonehenge still teaches this. Visitors still walk quietly as they approach. Voices lower. Steps slow. Even in an age of skyscrapers, these rough uprights command reverence. Their mystery still holds. Early monuments remind us that power does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers through unanswered questions. Sometimes it endures through stone that will not explain itself. And sometimes, the strongest voice is silence carved into the landscape. On a rocky hill above the city of Athens stands a ruin. Columns rise in pale stone, weathered, broken, yet still harmonious. The Parthenon. Its name echoes across centuries. But its meaning is written in balance, in proportion, in beauty carefully carved. This was not only a temple to Athena, goddess of wisdom and war. It was a declaration of Athens itself. A city made marble. A democracy made form. A statement that power could be shaped not only through conquest, but through harmony. When the Parthenon was raised in the 5th century BCE, Athens had triumphed over Persia. The city was strong, confident, proud. But rather than only parade soldiers or pile gold, the Athenians turned to architecture. They raised the Parthenon on the Acropolis, high above the streets, visible from sea and land. Every ship entering harbor saw it first. Every traveler on dusty road glimpsed it before the gates. The temple was both shrine and symbol, a sign that Athens had risen, and that Athens intended to endure. The Parthenon's beauty lies not in size alone. Other temples were larger, other monuments taller, but none were so precise, none so balanced, none so filled with quiet harmony. Its columns lean inward, almost imperceptibly, correcting what the human eye would see as sag. Its platform curves slightly, lifting the middle, preventing the illusion of droop. Every stone cut, every line measured, every proportion chosen, so that the whole would seem perfect. Architecture became philosophy. Beauty became argument. And the argument was this: Athens is in balance. Athens is in harmony. Athens is worthy. Inside, a colossal statue of Athena once stood. Ivory and gold, gleaming in torchlight. But even without the goddess, the building itself spoke. Each column a soldier, each lintel a shield, each angle a reminder of order. For the Athenians, democracy was fragile, contested, young. But by carving their ideals into marble, they gave them weight. The Parthenon was democracy made visible, not only in assemblies of men, but in a temple of stone. The Parthenon also told stories. On its friezes and pediments, carved in marble, were scenes of battles, myths, and processions. The gods in their struggles, the Athenians in their triumphs. The Panathenaic procession, where citizens carried offerings to Athena, was immortalized in sculpture. Here, architecture became memory, not only holding rituals within its walls, but carrying them forever in stone. For those who approached, the Parthenon was overwhelming. Its white marble caught sunlight and glowed golden. Its height lifted the eye upward, its symmetry stilled the mind. To stand before it was to feel the power of proportion. Not the brute force of fortress, not the mystery of megaliths, but the quiet command of beauty. And beauty can rule. For beauty convinces without argument. In time, the Parthenon survived change. It became church, then mosque, then ruin. Gunpowder scarred it, conquerors looted it, earthquakes shook it. Yet even broken, it commands. Even with columns missing, even with roof gone, its harmony remains. The proportions still persuade. The balance still whispers. The ruin is more powerful than many completed buildings, because it shows that power in stone does not require perfection. It requires presence. The Parthenon also shaped the world beyond Greece. Rome imitated its columns. Renaissance builders studied its ratios. Modern capitals borrowed its facades. Every courthouse with Doric pillars, every museum with pediment and portico, owes its lineage to Athens. Architecture became inheritance. Through marble, Athens taught not only its citizens, but future ages, that a building can be an idea. That stone can be democracy's voice. The lesson of the Parthenon is subtle. That power does not always dominate through fear. Sometimes it persuades through beauty. Sometimes it convinces by harmony. Sometimes it rules by reminding us that order, proportion, and balance can themselves be divine. Even now, when tourists walk its steps, when photographers capture its silhouette at sunset, the Parthenon still breathes this power. It does not need roof, statue, or paint. Its lines alone, its ratios alone, its presence alone, are enough. The Parthenon whispers that architecture is more than shelter, more than stone. It is the memory of a city's confidence, the shape of an idea carved into eternity. And though Athens has changed, though empires have risen and fallen, the Parthenon remains, steady on its hill, speaking still. At the heart of Rome lay open space. Not open in neglect, not empty in wilderness, but open by design. The Forum. It was not one building, not one monument, but a gathering of many. Temples, basilicas, arches, columns, courts, markets. All arranged around open ground where people walked, traded, argued, listened. If the Colosseum was Rome's theatre of spectacle, the Forum was its theatre of order. Here, power was not only shown, it was enacted. From the earliest days, the Forum was marketplace. Farmers drove in cattle. Merchants spread wares. Neighbors exchanged food and words. But quickly it grew into more. Because where people gathered, power gathered. Soon temples rose at its edges, dedicated to Saturn, to Vesta, to Castor and Pollux. Basilicas stretched long, their columns sheltering courts of law. Speakers climbed platforms, addressing the crowd, proposing laws, defending themselves. The Forum became Rome's voice. Not in parchment alone, but in stone, in space, in ritual of gathering. The architecture guided the body. The open plaza drew people in. The colonnades guided their steps. The rostra, the raised speaking platforms, lifted voices above heads. Here was hierarchy made visible. The people stood in the square. The magistrates mounted the steps. The senators gathered in basilicas. Each level of stone reflected level of power. And those who walked through learned, unconsciously, the choreography of empire. Triumphal arches marked the edges. Each arch a monument to conquest, each inscription a reminder of victory. To walk beneath was to pass through history. Columns rose, telling of emperors, carved with spirals of campaign and conquest. The Forum was a living book, but written in marble and brick, read by all who entered. The Forum was also a memory. Beneath its paving stones lay centuries of layers. New temples rose beside old ones, new arches beside crumbling ones. The result was a landscape of continuity. Romans could look around and see not only their present, but their past, embodied in stone. It was a reminder that Rome was not a moment, but an inheritance. And inheritance is power. In the Forum, justice was given. Trials unfolded in basilicas. Decisions spoken before all. The architecture lent weight. To speak in echoing hall was different than to speak in street. The stone gave permanence. Words carried farther, sounded heavier, felt more binding. Thus architecture itself lent law its gravity. The Forum was also theatre of ritual. Processions wound through it. Sacrifices smoked upon its altars. Funerals carried noble bodies past temples. Every ceremony was magnified by the space. The crowd gathered, the architecture framed, the moment became more than individual. It became collective memory. Power needs spectacle. But it also needs ritual. The Forum gave both. Emperors understood this. They expanded the Forum, built their own adjacent squares, added new temples, new arches, new basilicas. Each sought to inscribe his name in the stone landscape of Rome. Julius Caesar began. Augustus continued. Trajan crowned it with his own vast forum and towering column. Each forum was not only practical, but political. Each said, "My reign belongs in this chain of greatness. My authority joins the authority of those before." Architecture became lineage. Stone itself became genealogy. For citizens, the Forum was daily life. Here they walked, listened, shopped, petitioned, celebrated. But for rulers, it was stage. Stage on which laws could be declared, victories celebrated, justice displayed, mercy granted. Without the Forum, Rome's power would have been scattered. With it, power had a stage, a heart, a visible presence. Even now, in ruin, the Forum breathes this power. Broken columns rise against sky. Arches stand half gone, yet still arch. Pavements lie worn, yet still hold footprints of centuries. Tourists walk quietly, as if entering temple. Voices soften, because the space still commands. The ruins still whisper what the whole once shouted. That here, stone shaped order. Here, architecture was government. The Forum teaches that architecture can be more than structure. It can be stage. It can be script. It can be actor itself. The Forum was Rome's play of power. And though the actors have left, the stage remains. And the stones still remember their lines. On the eastern edge of Rome's Forum Valley rises a shell of stone so vast that even in ruin, it overwhelms. The Colosseum. An arena of arches stacked upon arches. A ring of stone and concrete that once held more than 50,000 people within its embrace. It is not only a building. It is a machine. A machine for spectacle. A machine for order. A machine for power. When the Colosseum was completed in the 1st century CE, it announced something simple, but profound. That the people of Rome, ordinary and noble alike, would be gathered, seated, and given a theatre of wonder. Gladiators fought, animals roared, dramas unfolded. But the true performance was Rome itself. Because the building was not neutral. It was design as declaration. The shape was circle. No corners, no privileged view. All eyes drawn inward toward the sand. Every seat arranged in tier upon tier, hierarchy visible in stone. At the bottom, closest to the arena, the emperor's box, then senators, then equestrians, then citizens, then women and foreigners at the top. The very structure taught order. One did not need a herald to explain who mattered more. The seating chart of stone made it clear. The arches carried weight not only in engineering, but in symbolism. Each arch framed entry. Each entry led to passage. Each passage led to stair. Tens of thousands could enter or exit in minutes. The crowd became manageable. Chaos was contained by corridors, directed by stone. Order out of multitude. That was Rome's genius. Beneath the arena lay hypogeum. Underground chambers, lifts, pulleys, cages. From there, animals rose suddenly into light. Gladiators appeared through trapdoors. Scenery shifted. Architecture created illusion. The Colosseum was not only stage, it was stagecraft. By engineering, the empire made wonder. And wonder, repeated, became loyalty. The spectacles themselves were varied. Morning hunts, beasts against hunters. Midday executions, criminals thrown to animals. Afternoon gladiators, armed and trained, fighting for survival or for show. All framed by the ellipse of stone. All magnified by echoing crowd. The building did not simply host these events. It magnified them. Its high walls trapped sound, turned roar into thunder, made every cheer, every cry, every clash, larger than life. The people felt not only entertained, but engulfed. For rulers, this was purpose. The Colosseum was gift and bargain. Bread and circuses, as the phrase later said. Food distributed, spectacle provided. In return, obedience expected. Architecture gave form to this exchange. Because power that feeds and entertains is power that lasts. The Colosseum was a reminder that Rome could build, could provide, could dazzle. No speech could persuade so many at once. But stone, spectacle, and shared or could. Consider its engineering. Concrete foundations deep enough to anchor centuries. Travertine blocks clamped with iron. Vaulted corridors repeated hundreds of times, each one precise, each one carrying weight of thousands above. Stairs spiraled efficiently, vomitoria, the exits, spilled crowds like rivers. Every detail planned. Every possibility foreseen. This was not random gathering. This was controlled mass. Architecture as discipline. Even its decoration carried meaning. Statues filled the arches. Gods and emperors looking down upon crowd. Paint and banners colored the space. Awnings stretched above to shade against sun. The emperor's presence magnified. His generosity displayed. For though gladiators fought, it was the emperor who gave the games. And the Colosseum itself reminded all who entered, such generosity comes from power, and only from power. Yet the building outlasted even that message. Centuries passed. The games ended. The empire fell. But the Colosseum remained. Its stones plundered for palaces. Its arches shattered by quake. Its arena turned into chapel. Still, it stood. And in standing, it continued to speak. That architecture of power, even when stripped of purpose, still commands awe. Even ruin teaches. Visitors today still walk its corridors, still climb its steps. They no longer see lions, no longer hear gladiators clash. Yet their voices soften. Their eyes widen. Their steps slow. Because the Colosseum's form still commands. Its arches, its mass, its circle, still whisper of power once gathered. The machine of spectacle no longer runs. But the silence left behind is still louder than many voices. The Colosseum teaches that architecture can gather thousands, can control them, can shape their experience without word or whip. That stone itself can be crowd control. That form itself can create loyalty. Rome understood this. And Rome carved that lesson into stone so vast it still overwhelms. Wherever humans built walls, they built messages. A hut kept out wind. A barn kept out rain. But a fortress kept out everything. And in doing so, it did more than defend. It intimidated. Stone raised against horizon, towers stabbing sky, gates barred with iron, these were not only protections. They were performances. Performances of power. Consider a castle on a hill. It is not hidden. It does not seek concealment. It announces itself miles away. Approach along the road and the walls rise higher. Shadows deepen. Towers loom. Even before reaching the gate, the visitor has been made small. Intimidation begins with scale. Because power is felt first in the body. Knees weaken, breath shortens, eyes strain upward. Architecture does this before a single soldier is seen. The medieval fortress was as much theatre as it was defense. Moats gleamed, bridges lifted, portcullises dropped. Each detail was functional, yes, but also psychological. The moat was obstacle, but also symbol of separation. The drawbridge, raised, was denial made visible. The portcullis, iron teeth ready to fall, was threat suspended above the head. Each element whispered, "You are outside, powerless, dependent on permission." Walls carried the same lesson. A city without walls was open, vulnerable, ordinary. A city with walls was sovereign, proud, unyielding. The thickness of stone mattered. To break it required effort so vast that even imagining the attempt filled enemies with hesitation. And hesitation was victory before battle. Towers multiplied the message. From their tops, banners flew. Archers stood watch. Bells rang. But even without these, their silhouettes alone declared authority. A tower is I. It sees farther than you. It watches longer than you. It warns before you arrive. To be seen by tower was to be measured by power before you reached the gate. Intimidation also came from design of space inside. Gatehouses bent in angles, forcing invaders to slow. Courtyards narrowed, trapping bodies between higher walls. Stairs spiraled clockwise so defenders above had freedom of sword arm while attackers below were cramped. These were strategies, but also statements. That the fortress was always one step ahead. That resistance was always late. Fortresses spoke to friend as much as foe. For peasants who saw castle rise on horizon, there was reassurance. Here was protection, here was lordship embodied. But reassurance and intimidation are two sides of same coin. The same wall that sheltered could also exclude. The same gate that opened for ally could slam for rebel. Power is always double-edged. And architecture makes both edges sharp. Consider Constantinople. Its Theodosian walls stretched miles, layer upon layer. Moats outside, towers punctuating, walls doubled and tripled. For centuries, armies camped beyond them. Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, Crusaders. Most failed. The walls intimidated not only by height, but by history. So many had tried. So few had succeeded. To stand before them was to feel futility. And futility is power in stone. In Europe, castles multiplied. Each valley crowned with fortress, each river guarded by keep. Kings built to control nobles. Nobles built to control peasants. Every stone laid was reminder of hierarchy. Villages might be humble, but above them, on hill, the castle looked down. The gaze of stone never blinked. In China, fortresses grew into walls so long they touched horizon itself. The Great Wall stretched across deserts, mountains, plains. Its watchtowers blinked like eyes across distance. Here was intimidation not at scale of city, but at scale of empire. To see wall crest a ridge was to know that empire claimed even emptiness. That even wilderness was surveyed, ordered, defended. Fortresses were also symbols for rulers themselves. A king might own crown, throne, palace. But his true power was measured in stone. A weak castle invited rebellion. A strong one silenced it before it began. Thus kings invested in height, thickness, cunning design. Because each brick was more than defense. It was deterrence. And deterrence is often more valuable than war. Even in ruin, fortresses intimidate. walk among broken towers, shattered gates, walls worn. And still, they dominate landscape. Because intimidation is not only about strength, but about presence. Even fallen, a fortress whispers, "Once, power stood here." Once, all who approached bent their necks. Once, stone itself commanded respect. And the whisper is enough to echo still. The lesson of fortresses is clear. That power defends. But power also displays. That protection is inseparable from intimidation. That a wall is as much a statement as it is a shield. Architecture here was not neutral. It was psychological weapon. Stone became soldier. Tower became voice. Gate became verdict. And all who saw understood. That power lives not only in armies, but in the very stones that watch from above. In the heart of medieval Europe, cities grew from markets into kingdoms of stone. And above their narrow streets, their crowded houses, their noisy stalls, rose shapes that still command silence. The Gothic cathedrals. Spines of stone that seemed less built than grown. Arches that leapt skyward like prayers made visible. Glass that turned sunlight into stories of saints and angels. They were not only houses of worship. They were fortresses of faith. Theaters of theology. Monuments of submission. The first impression was always height. No house rose so high, no palace dared such ambition. From miles away, spires pierced sky. Towers beckoned pilgrims. Bells rang across valleys. Approach, and the cathedral swelled larger, swallowing streets, dwarfing markets. Step inside, and the scale multiplied. Ceilings rose like forests of stone, columns branched into ribs, vaults lifted eyes until necks strained. Height was not indulgence. It was instruction. To feel small was to feel God great. And in feeling, obedience followed. Light was second impression. Not light plain, but light transformed. Through stained glass, sunlight bent into blues deeper than ocean, reds warmer than fire, greens that glowed like leaves in eternal spring. Windows told stories. Noah's flood, Christ's passion, saints' miracles. The illiterate learned faith not from books but from glass. Each shaft of light a sermon. Each color a command. And as sun shifted through day, stories shifted too. Architecture turned time into theology. The Gothic arch made all this possible. Pointed, not rounded, it carried weight upward. Walls grew thinner, windows larger. Stone seemed to float. Engineering became revelation. For in its daring, it whispered that even stone obeyed heaven. The impossible was made possible. And what was possible in stone was possible in faith. Cathedrals were also cities within cities. Markets gathered in their shadow. Guilds marched in their processions. Kings were crowned at their altars. Architecture here was not passive. It choreographed life. To marry, to mourn, to pray, to swear allegiance, all was done beneath vault and spire. Power flowed not only from throne but from altar. And the cathedral was altar made permanent. Consider Notre Dame of Paris. Its facade layered with kings and prophets carved in stone. Its towers rising like watchmen over Seine. Or Chartres, where glass tells story after story, a Bible in color. Or Cologne, begun in one century, finished in another, yet seamless in ambition. Each cathedral consumed generations. Grandfathers laid foundations, grandsons carved spires. The work itself was devotion. And devotion itself was power. For a people willing to build for centuries is a people bound by purpose. Cathedrals humbled rulers too. A king might own armies, but only the church raised spires higher than his palace. When he entered, he bowed like commoner. Architecture equalized by humbling all before heaven. But the church, which commanded cathedrals, claimed that power for itself. Thus stone became argument, God above kings, church above crown. Cathedrals also stored relics. Bones of saints, fragments of cross, treasures of gold and ivory. Pilgrims came, coins followed, wealth grew. Architecture multiplied wealth by multiplying awe. The higher the tower, the brighter the window, the longer the procession, the greater the offering. Faith fed architecture. Architecture fed faith. A circle of power, sustained in stone. Even sound was shaped. Vaults turned choirs into thunder. Chants rose and echoed, filling every corner. The building itself became instrument. To sing inside was to join structure and voice. Faith became physical, sensory, undeniable. And yet, beyond religion, cathedrals were political. To build one was to place a city on map of Europe. To possess tallest spire was to rival neighbors. Every stone laid was also rivalry declared. Architecture as competition. Faith as contest. Even now, their power remains. Wars scarred them, revolutions stripped them, fires threatened them. But still they rise, still they awe, still they draw millions. Tourists enter and fall silent. Not from belief alone, but from scale, from light, from harmony. The architecture still commands. The Gothic cathedral teaches that stone can humble, glass can teach, height can persuade. That architecture can make submission voluntary. That beauty itself can control. And that power, when carved into light and arch, can endure longer than crown or sword. High in the Andes, above valleys cut by rivers silver in sunlight, where clouds gather close and condors circle wide, lies a city of stone. Machu Picchu. Even in ruin, it takes breath away. Terraces descending like green stairways. Walls fitted so tightly without mortar that centuries of storm could not break them. Temples aligned to sun, plazas framed by mountains. This was not accident. This was intention. The Inca built with more than stone. They built with earth, with sky, with horizon itself. Their architecture was not placed upon landscape. It was fused into it. The Incas believed mountains were sacred. Apis, mountain spirits, guarded valleys, watched rivers, received offerings. To build among them was to dwell with gods. So Inca builders did not erase mountains. They conversed with them. Walls bent to rock faces. Terraces followed slopes. Temples pointed to peaks. Architecture here was dialogue between human and mountain, between ruler and sky, between empire and eternity. Machu Picchu shows this most clearly. Its Temple of the Sun curves to greet dawn at solstice. Its Intihuatana, the hitching post of the sun, stands carved from single stone, aligned to equinoxes. At key moments, light falls precisely upon niches, windows, corners. Stone becomes calendar. Temple becomes instrument. Power here was not only in conquest of people, but in mastery of time itself. To command solstice, to predict seasons, to align ritual with heaven, this was authority divine. But the stones themselves carried message too. Inca masonry is famous for its precision. Blocks shaped irregular, yet fitted perfectly. So tight no knife fits between. This was not only craft. It was control. To take granite from mountain, shape it by hand, and fit it into wall that resists quake and storm, this was demonstration of discipline, of power over nature's resistance. And nature respected such power. Earthquakes shook, but walls stood. Storms drenched, but stones held. Architecture became endurance incarnate. Machu Picchu was not mere town. It was royal estate, ritual center, symbol. Terraces fed it, but terraces also demonstrated empire's control of steep land. Plazas gathered people, but plazas also displayed order in midst of wilderness. The city said, the Inca are not confined to valley, not bound by plain. They command mountains themselves. And to command mountains is to command cosmos. Everywhere, water whispered the same lesson. Channels carved in stone carried springs across terraces. Fountains stepped downward, flowing from pool to pool. The city drank not from accident but from design. Water was tamed, directed, honored. For water was life, and life controlled was power confirmed. Beyond Machu Picchu, the Inca built across empire. Roads spanned thousands of miles, straight across cliffs, over rivers, through passes where even llamas hesitated. Suspension bridges of woven fiber swung above gorges. Storehouses perched on slopes stored grain for armies and drought. Every building, every road, every terrace whispered the same message: empire has reach. Empire has endurance. Empire has order. Unlike Gothic cathedrals, Inca architecture was not vertical to sky. It was horizontal with earth. Blending, bending, fitting. To outsiders, this might seem humility. But to Inca, it was claim of harmony. By fitting stone to mountain, they claimed mountain itself. By aligning temple to sun, they claimed rhythm of heaven itself. Authority was not shouted in spire. It was whispered in alignment. And whispers can be stronger than shouts. Even now, travelers climb to Machu Picchu and fall silent. Not from belief in old gods, but from sense that place itself breathes meaning. The stones still cling, the terraces still curve, the sun still rises in windows chosen by long-dead builders. The architecture has outlasted empire. The empire is gone. The stones remain. And in remaining, they still command awe. The lesson of Machu Picchu is clear. That power can be carved not only against nature, but with it. That authority can be proclaimed not by dominating mountain, but by marrying it. That the most enduring monuments are those that fit landscape so deeply that even ruin cannot erase them. Machu Picchu is ruin, yet it still feels whole. Because its true architecture was not walls alone. It was mountain, river, sky. And those endure. In the heart of Beijing lies a city within a city. A palace so vast that it required walls within walls, gates within gates, courtyards within courtyards. The Forbidden City. For nearly 5 centuries it was the seat of Chinese emperors. But more than palace, it was theater of hierarchy. Every stone, every step, every roof tile was arranged to remind subjects, courtiers, and rulers themselves of the order of heaven and earth. The very name carried weight. Forbidden. Ordinary citizens could not enter. Merchants and travelers could not cross its gates. It was not simply residence. It was boundary. Inside lay the emperor, son of heaven. Outside lay the world he ruled. The wall was more than protection. It was separation made visible. Power begins with distance. And the Forbidden City was distance carved into brick and stone. Pass through its gates and the lesson continued. The Meridian Gate, vast and imposing, swallowed visitors beneath towers of red wall and golden roof. Step inside, and one did not meet emperor at once. Instead, one faced courtyards. Wide, empty spaces that slowed steps, magnified distance, drained confidence. Crossing them was ordeal. Heat in summer, cold in winter, every eye upon you, every movement noticed. By the time you reached throne, you had already learned submission. Architecture itself had trained you to bow. Courtyards multiplied. Not one, but many. Each larger than houses outside, each framed by halls and gates. The sequence was endless. Gate, courtyard, hall. Gate, courtyard, hall. A rhythm of approach, retreat, approach again. The design created ceremony even before ritual began. The emperor did not need to speak. The stones spoke for him. Hierarchy was visible in layout. The central axis ran north to south, reserved for emperor. Side halls lined the flanks, for ministers, scribes, guards. The higher one's status, the closer one moved to the axis. The lower, the farther to the side. Even geography obeyed hierarchy. Space itself became discipline. Color carried meaning too. Walls painted red for happiness and vitality. Roofs glazed yellow, the imperial hue. Other colors reserved for lesser ranks. A subject did not need to ask his place. The tiles told him. Even in silence, architecture whispered order. The Hall of Supreme Harmony stood at the center. The largest hall, throne upon dais, golden dragons curling across beams, incense rising. Here emperors received homage. Here edicts were read. Here rituals of state unfolded, magnified by architecture itself. To stand beneath its roof was to stand in theater of obedience. Every beam glittered, every space echoed, every eye turned toward throne. The hall did not merely shelter power. It staged it. Yet beyond spectacle, the Forbidden City was also control of rhythm. Officials rose at dawn, entered through gates, moved along prescribed paths. Every corridor a funnel, every courtyard a stage, every audience timed and measured. By arranging space, rulers arranged time. By controlling where one walked, they controlled what one thought. Architecture became choreography of obedience. Even sound was shaped. The vast courtyards carried footsteps like drums. Whispers seemed loud, silences seemed endless. Bells rang, drums sounded, rituals synchronized. The palace itself was instrument of authority. The Forbidden City was not built in haste. 15 years of labor, hundreds of thousands of workers, mountains of timber, oceans of tile. The scale itself was lesson. That an emperor could summon such effort proved his link to heaven. That such a city could rise at all declared divine mandate visible. Every brick was evidence of legitimacy. But the palace was not only for subjects. It was also mirror for emperor. Within its walls, he was reminded of cosmic role. The central axis aligned to North Star. The throne aligned to heaven. By living at center, emperor embodied center. Architecture reinforced belief that his rule was not opinion but order of cosmos. For centuries, dynasties ruled from within. Some strong, some weak. Some wise, some cruel. But all walked the same courtyards, sat in same halls, passed through same gates. And the architecture outlasted them. The walls remained when rulers fell. The halls remained when thrones were empty. The palace itself became continuity. Even today, when tourists walk its spaces, the effect lingers. Courtyards still dwarf the body. Gates still frame horizon. Halls still gleam with color. Voices lower, steps slow. Because architecture continues to command, even without throne. The Forbidden City teaches that power can be created not only by force, but by distance, hierarchy, and ritual of space. That architecture can be law, lesson, obedience made visible. That to pass through gate and courtyard is to pass through power itself. And though emperors have gone, the stones still stage their silent play. On the banks of the Yamuna River, where water bends in gentle arc, a building rises that seems less built than dreamed. The Taj Mahal. Domes like clouds at rest, minarets standing like watchful guardians, walls inlaid with flowers that never fade. It is called a mausoleum. But it is more than tomb. It is empire written in marble, love carved into eternity, power disguised as beauty. The story begins with grief. Shah Jahan, Emperor of Mughal India, lost his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal. In her memory, he commanded monument. But this was not private gesture alone. It was also public declaration. That love could be empire. That sorrow could be marble. That a ruler's devotion could shape horizon itself. The Taj is symmetry perfected. 4 minarets frame central dome. Gardens spread in balance. Water channels divide in cross. Every angle reflects another. Every line mirrors itself. The effect is calm, inevitable, eternal. Visitors enter and feel world itself aligned. Such balance is not accident. It is authority. To impose order upon chaos, to carve perfection from stone, is to say, here is power so complete it leaves nothing uneven. The marble itself carries meaning. White, luminous, changing with day. At dawn, it blushes pink. At noon, it glows bright. At dusk, it turns golden. Beneath moon, it shines silver. The building seems alive, breathing light. In this, it whispers eternity. For though empires shift, though rulers die, the stone continues to change and yet remain. Endurance hidden inside beauty. The Taj is also voice of empire at its height. The Mughal court commanded artisans from across lands. Calligraphers, stonecutters, inlayers, gardeners. Jade from China, crystal from Tibet, turquoise from Persia, sapphire from Sri Lanka. The building was global long before the word existed. To gather such wealth, to command such craft, was to prove empire's reach. The mausoleum was love, but it was also empire showing itself to the world. Step closer, and detail emerges. Verses from Quran inlaid in black marble flow along doorways. Flowers carved into stone blossom as if alive. Geometric patterns interlace endlessly. No corner neglected, no surface empty. The artistry declares that beauty itself can be discipline. That perfection of detail is perfection of rule. The gardens, too, were message. Laid in Charbar style, fourfold plan, rivers of paradise mirrored on earth. The emperor declared, "My beloved rests not only in tomb, but in paradise made visible." Architecture became theology. And theology became power. For if a ruler can make heaven appear on earth, what can resist him? Visitors of every age felt awe. Travelers wrote of it, poets praised it, painters copied it. Even those who did not share faith or empire admitted wonder. And wonder is power, subtler but stronger than fear. Because where fortresses command obedience, beauty invites surrender. And surrender can be just as binding. The Taj Mahal is often called a monument of love. And it is. But it is also monument of memory, monument of empire, monument of permanence. It whispers that power is not only force. It can also be tenderness preserved, beauty perfected, grief turned into glory. That even sorrow, when carved in marble, becomes strength. Centuries have passed. Rulers fallen, empires ended. But the Taj remains. Tourists flock, cameras click, yet silence falls as they approach. Because the building still commands. Its beauty still persuades, its symmetry still instructs, its light still moves hearts. Architecture here is not only stone. It is emotion given form. And emotion endures longer than armies. The Taj Mahal teaches that architecture can breathe not only intimidation or order, but wonder. That a building can soften as well as command. That empire can cloak itself in beauty, and beauty can outlast empire. And so the marble dome rises still above the river, changing with sun, glowing with moon, breathing eternity into night. It begins as a line. A ridge traced across hills, a shadow along mountains. But follow it, and the line becomes wall. Stone and earth rising from valley floor. Stretching mile after mile. The Great Wall of China. Not one wall, not one moment, but centuries of labor joined together. Dynasty after dynasty, emperor after emperor, adding length, adding height, repairing, extending. Until the line became horizon itself. Until empire itself could be seen in stone. The wall was defense. Nomadic horsemen rode from north. Raids struck villages, markets, fields. To build barrier was to slow, to warn, to resist. Watchtowers lit fires at night, smoke by day, messages leaping faster than horses. Stone slowed, towers signaled, soldiers gathered. This was practical. But it was also symbolic. Because the wall did more than keep out enemies. It declared where empire ended. It carved boundary into earth itself. Stand upon it and look outward. On one side, fields, villages, canals, palaces. On the other, steppe, wilderness, unknown. The wall did not only divide land. It divided identity. Inside, China, ordered, cultivated, settled. Outside, other, dangerous, untamed. Architecture here shaped imagination. A people learned who they were by learning where walls stood. The wall also intimidated within. To build it required millions of hands. Laborious pressed into service, soldiers guarding, officials directing. The scale itself reminded people of Emperor's reach. That he could summon such work, such suffering, such endurance. Every brick was obedience made visible. Every watchtower was loyalty built in stone. The wall was not smooth line. It climbed mountains, crossed rivers, bent with terrain. Its turns and twists made it seem endless. To walk upon it is to feel small, the horizon never reached. And that, too, was part of its power. To remind subject and stranger alike that empire had no limit. That authority could stretch as far as eye could see. Architecture here was landscape. Mountains became foundation. Valleys became moats. Stone was not placed on earth, but woven into it. The wall did not ignore terrain. It became terrain. In this, it whispered permanence. That empire was not passing ruler, but mountain itself. The wall also carried ritual. Garrisons stationed at towers, soldiers patrolling. At dawn, drums sounded. At night, torches lit. The daily rhythm of empire written across miles. Each soldier part of vast choreography. Each tower voice in great chorus of defense. Architecture became ritual, turning border into heartbeat. But the wall was also theatre. Foreign envoys walked beneath its shadow. To see such vastness before reaching capital was to feel awe. Negotiations began not with words, but with sight of stone stretching beyond sight. The wall spoke before emperor spoke. And its voice was intimidation itself. Even after empire fell, the wall remained. Storms tore, stones crumbled, villages stole bricks for homes. Yet ridges of wall still crown mountains. Watchtowers still mark horizon. Even in ruin, it commands. Because architecture of such scale does not vanish. It becomes part of landscape itself. The Great Wall teaches that architecture can be boundary, identity, intimidation, horizon. That stone stretched far enough becomes map itself. That empire can be drawn not only on parchment, but on mountain ridges. And though dynasties ended, though soldiers left, though watchfires burned out, the wall remains. Silent, immense, stretching like memory itself. Power written so vast that even time cannot erase it. Not all monuments of power were temples. Not all were palaces or tombs. Some were simpler. Arches over rivers. Channels of stone carrying water across valleys. Bridges and aqueducts. They might seem practical, almost humble. But in their time, they were as awe-inspiring as pyramids, as commanding as fortresses. Because they declared something extraordinary, that nature itself could be bent, directed, ordered by human will. And that order belonged to empire. Consider Rome. The Romans built for permanence. Roads paved straight across hills, soars beneath streets, and above all, bridges and aqueducts. Arches spanning rivers, aqueducts marching across countryside like stone armies. To see one was to see power made useful. Power not only to command men, but to command earth and water. Aqueducts first. Rome was thirsty. Her population vast. Fountains needed filling, baths needed heating, houses needed washing, gardens needed watering. Rivers alone were not enough. Wells too shallow. So the Romans reached farther. Springs miles away were tapped. Water carried in channels lined with stone, sloping gently, precise as geometry. 4 mile after mile the aqueducts ran, sometimes hidden underground, sometimes rising upon arches that strode across valleys. The Pont du Gard in France still rises, tier upon tier, its arches reflecting sky and river below. To peasants, to travelers, to villagers, such a sight must have felt miraculous. Water, moving across land without river, pouring from mountains into cities. It was not miracle. It was empire. Aqueducts were architecture of generosity. They gave clean water to people, filled baths where rich and poor alike washed, flowed into fountains that all could drink. But generosity was also control. Because the aqueduct said, only empire can give this. Only empire has reach, discipline, resources to summon mountains into pipes of stone. Loyalty flowed with water. Each sip was reminder of Rome's authority. Bridges carried same message. Where rivers cut land, others halted. Rome did not halt. Arches sprang from banks, spanned waters, carried roads forward. The Pons Fabricius in Rome still stands, used daily after 2,000 years. Its endurance alone is power. To stand upon stone older than memory is to feel time itself obey engineering. Bridges were arteries of empire. They let legions march quickly, traders move safely, messengers ride without delay. But beyond function, they were spectacles. A villager who had never seen more than ferry suddenly walked across river dry-footed upon stone. The feeling was not only relief. It was awe. Because bridge did not merely cross river. It conquered it. The secret lay in the arch. That curve of stone distributing weight, holding more than seemed possible. One arch, then many, repeating like rhythm. The sight of them was lesson. That order, repeated, could create strength. That discipline, multiplied, could cross any distance. Architecture here was philosophy in stone. The aqueduct and bridge were humble compared to temples. Yet they lasted longer. Because they were useful. Because they were loved. When empires fell, when thrones toppled, people still needed water, still needed crossing. So they repaired aqueducts, maintained bridges. Empire faded, but engineering endured. And in enduring, it kept empire alive in memory. Even in ruin, they command. A broken aqueduct still stretches across valley, arches marching like ghosts. A ruined bridge still rises above river, reminding all that once, people crossed here without fear. Stone persists longer than decree. And utility becomes monument. The lesson of bridges and aqueducts is clear. That power need not always intimidate with size or glitter with beauty. It can persuade by usefulness. It can rule by making life easier. Rome's glory was not only its armies. It was its water flowing in fountains, its roads straight and dry, its bridges sure, its aqueducts silent above fields. Architecture became empire's promise. That under its order, rivers would serve, mountains would yield, thirst would vanish. That life itself would be smoother. And such a promise is perhaps the deepest power of all. In the flatlands outside Paris, where once stood Hunting Lodge among forests and marsh, a palace rose that became symbol of monarchy itself. Versailles. Endless corridors, mirrored halls, gardens unfolding like green geometry. It was not only residence of Louis XIV, the Sun King. It was his stage. Every wall, every path, every reflection choreographed loyalty. Here, architecture itself bent courtiers into orbit, reminding all that the center of France was not Paris, not even the kingdom, but Louis, radiant as the sun. The approach already announced message. Miles of avenue, straight as arrow, funneled visitors toward palace. From distance, the gilded roofs glowed in sunlight. The palace did not emerge suddenly. It grew larger with each step, pressing upon the eye, pressing upon the mind. By the time one reached the gates, the lesson was already clear. This was not home. It was universe. And the king was at its center. Inside, Versailles overwhelmed not with height, like cathedrals, but with scale. Corridors stretched endlessly. Chambers multiplied. Over 2,000 windows, 700 rooms, staircases that never seemed to end. The building itself exhausted. And that exhaustion was deliberate. For a courtier lost in corridors, dependent on guides, was courtier reminded of king's vastness. Power made itself felt not only in marble, but in confusion. The palace swallowed individuality and returned it only in relation to throne. Most famous was the Hall of Mirrors. A corridor glittering with glass, chandeliers, gilded arches. On one side, mirrors reflected endlessly. On the other, windows opened to gardens that seemed to stretch to horizon. Light multiplied. Sunbeams entered, candles shimmered, reflections repeated without end. Louis XIV staged receptions here. Every step echoed, every bow magnified. The king stood at center, courtiers gathered around, and all saw themselves reflected, but reflected in relation to him. He was not only ruler. He was axis of reflection. Versailles was not merely palace. It was ritual machine. Every act of the king became performance. When he woke, courtiers attended, watching as he rose, dressed, ate. When he dined, the same. When he walked gardens, fountains danced, orchestras played. The architecture framed his daily rhythm. No gesture private, every gesture staged. To see him eat was to be reminded that even simplest act of king was greater than act of any subject. Versailles made ordinary divine. The gardens carried same message. Designed by André Lenotre, they spread like tapestry of symmetry. Avenues cut straight, fountains shot water high, hedges trimmed exact. Nature itself was disciplined, ordered, bent into geometry. As palace embodied power over courtiers, gardens embodied power over nature. Both together declared, nothing resists Sun King. Not man, not tree, not water, not earth. Yet Versailles was not only theatre of splendor. It was cage of courtiers. Louis summoned nobility to live here, away from their provinces, away from power of land. Here, they competed not with swords, but with bows, with manners, with access. Who held candle at king's waking? Who handed glove before hunt? Who stood nearest in mirrored hall? Architecture staged these contests. Nobles spent fortunes to maintain presence, but in doing so, weakened themselves. Versailles tamed them, and in taming them, strengthened king. Even sound served ritual. Music flowed in corridors. Trumpets announced entrances. Fountains timed to orchestras in garden. Silence was rare. The palace hummed with orchestrated life, like solar system turning around star. Versailles was also monument to extravagance. Gold leaf on cornices, marble floors polished, ceilings painted with gods gazing down on king. All said same, Louis was not ordinary ruler, he was chosen, he was Sun King. Myth painted onto architecture, and myth became power. Yet beneath glitter lay discipline. Every hall had protocol, every stair sequence, every chamber rules. A misstep was humiliation. A correct gesture won favor. Architecture enforced etiquette. Walls were not neutral, they were script. And courtiers played roles upon them. Centuries passed. Revolutions came. Monarchy fell. But Versailles remains. Visitors walk mirrored hall, gaze at gardens, wander endless rooms. They feel or still. Because palace still breathes Sun King's presence. The choreography has ended, but stage still whispers lines. Versailles teaches that architecture can control not only body, but behavior. That a palace can become theater, ritual, choreography of obedience. That beauty itself can bind, and splendor itself can subdue. And though the Sun King set long, his palace still glows. Stone, glass, and garden still carry his light into history. Power has always borrowed from the past. When modern nations rose, they sought forms that could persuade, inspire, endure. And again, they turned to ancient languages of stone, to columns of Greece, to arches of Rome, to domes that promised both heaven and empire. So it is that Washington, Paris, London, Berlin, Delhi, Buenos Aires, cities far from Athens and Rome, echo them still. Architecture became inheritance, and inheritance became power reborn. Consider Washington, D.C. Planned not as accident, but as vision. A capital drawn on paper before stone was laid. Pierre L'Enfant's design spread broad avenues, radiating from centers of power, crossing at angles, framing domes and columns. The very plan whispered order. Wide boulevards prevented chaos. Open spaces magnified monuments. Citizens walking streets did not wander, they processed. Every step reminded them of the Republic's gravity. At its heart, the Capitol. A dome rising white above city. From afar, it recalls Pantheon of Rome. Inside, rotunda painted with scenes of founding, of liberty, of divine approval. Columns frame halls, marble echoes footsteps, chambers resound with debate. Here, architecture persuades that democracy is not fragile experiment. It is heir to Rome, to Greece, to ages past. The building is not only workplace. It is argument in stone. That authority here is ancient, enduring, legitimate. The White House speaks differently. Not vast like palace, not overwhelming like fortress. It balances power with accessibility. Columns suggest dignity. Porches suggest approach. Architecture here stages republic as both strong and familiar. Power tempered by domestic form. The Supreme Court declares in sterner voice. Its facade pure Greek temple, Corinthian columns lifting pediment high. Carved words above entrance, equal justice under law. Here, architecture makes law sacred. Every litigant who climbs steps feels small, every judge who enters feels tradition behind. Columns, unchanged for 2 millennia, carry justice into present. Washington is not alone. Paris rebuilt under Haussmann spread wide boulevards like imperial Rome, monuments at intersections, sightlines drawn to domes and arches. London crowned itself with St. Paul's Dome, echoing classical forms. Berlin raised Reichstag and Brandenburg Gate in neoclassical dress. Even new nations, seeking legitimacy, borrowed old stone languages. In Buenos Aires, in Delhi, in Canberra, parliaments rose with domes and porticos. Power everywhere leaned upon the same architecture, because people everywhere trusted its message. Why this return? Because columns and domes whisper permanence. They say, this state is not fleeting. This law is not fragile. This republic is heir to centuries. Architecture became genealogy. Even young nations borrowed ancestors. Yet modern capitals also use space to persuade. Washington's National Mall stretches green corridor, lined with monuments, closed by Lincoln's Temple of Columns. To walk it is pilgrimage. Each memorial stage's lesson. Washington in obelisk, Jefferson in dome, Lincoln enthroned like Zeus. Stone makes statesmen into timeless figures. And by visiting, citizens join the ritual. Capitals also intimidate by distance. Avenue wide, steps long, plaza broad. One does not rush into chamber. One ascends slowly, crosses deliberately. The body learns humility through space. What Gothic cathedrals did for faith, capitals do for state. Architecture humbles into obedience. Even materials carry message. Marble chosen for purity. Granite for strength. Buildings gleam white, unchanging, while cities around them shift with time. The permanence of stone becomes permanence of law. Appearance becomes argument. But capitals are also theatres for power's spectacle. Parades march through avenues. Inaugurations unfold on steps. Speeches echo against domes. The city itself becomes stage. A citizen standing before monument does not simply observe. They participate. The architecture frames them into audience of history. Of course, capitals can change voice. Berlin's Reichstag, once seat of empire, burned, then ruined, then reborn with glass dome open to sky. Transparency became new language. London's Parliament, scarred by war, still raises Gothic towers as defiance. New Delhi's government quarter blends British neoclassicism with Indian motifs, layering authority with hybrid memory. Each capital speaks differently, but all speak with architecture. Even today, skyscrapers rise higher, technology shifts skylines. Yet capitals still turn to domes, columns, arches. Even steel nations trust stone grammar. Because the old language still persuades. The lesson of modern capitals is this: that power endures by clothing itself in continuity. That even revolutions borrow from ruins they once rejected. That architecture is memory, and memory is authority. Washington, Paris, London, Delhi. All prove same point. That a column can be more convincing than a speech. That a dome can be more enduring than a law. That a capital built in stone persuades citizens that nation too is built to last. In the ancient world, power was carved in stone, spread wide across valleys, or raised in spires toward heaven. But in the modern age, ambition found a new direction. Upward. The skyscraper became empire's new monument. Not tomb, not palace, not fortress, but tower of steel and glass. A vertical city. A statement that power now measured itself not in acres, but in height. The story began in late 19th century. Chicago, scarred by fire of 1871, rebuilt with steel frames and elevators. Buildings that once stopped at 6 stories suddenly leapt to 10, 12, 20. Each new tower was competition, each height a claim. The skyline became battlefield of ambition. and ambition itself became architecture. Soon New York joined. The Flatiron rose, then Woolworth Building, Cathedral of Commerce. Later, Empire State Building, Chrysler Building, Rockefeller Center. Each taller, sleeker, more daring. Each declared not only engineering triumph, but corporate dominance. No pharaoh's pyramid, no emperor's forum, no king's cathedral was more public than these. For the modern crowd, looking upward replaced kneeling. The skyscraper bent the neck just as surely as spire once did. Material made this possible. Steel frames bore weight. Elevators carried bodies upward. Glass sheathed facades in light. Practical, yes, but also symbolic. Steel whispered strength, glass whispered transparency, height whispered ambition. Together, they announced new form of power. Not divine, not dynastic, but corporate. Banks, insurance firms, oil companies, tech giants, all carved their names into sky. The building itself became advertisement. The skyline itself became brand. Skyscrapers also gathered crowd into hierarchy. Lower floors bustled with shops, cafes, lobbies. Higher floors filled with offices. Top floors with boardrooms or penthouses. The higher, the rarer. Just as in amphitheater or palace, architecture staged hierarchy. Only now, vertical. Power lived above. Ordinary lives filled space below. Cities competed in skylines. New York against Chicago. Hong Kong against Shanghai. Dubai against Riyadh. Each new tower promised world's tallest. Burj Khalifa now pierces desert sky, more mountain than building. Its spire visible for miles, its fountains choreographed below, its glass shimmering like star fallen to earth. It is not only engineering, it is theater. A desert kingdom declaring itself center of future by writing its ambition into clouds. Skyscrapers also reshape psychology of city. To walk beneath them is to feel canyon of glass. Sunlight slices between towers, shadows fall long, wind bends around corners. The body feels small, the mind feels awe. Intimidation once staged by fortress wall now staged by skyline. The city itself becomes fortress, its towers battlements. At night, skyscrapers glow. Windows flicker like constellations. Entire facades become screens. The skyline itself becomes performance. In light, corporations speak. Banks blaze logos. Nations project flags. Architecture becomes voice, speaking silently yet seen by all. Yet skyscrapers also symbolize fragility. On September 11, 2001, when the Twin Towers of New York fell, the world saw not only destruction, but collapse of symbol. The towers had been global icons of trade and finance. Their fall became global wound. Power written in height was revealed vulnerable. And yet, rebuilding came. One World Trade Center rose, taller, brighter, to declare that power, though struck, would endure. Architecture again became resilience in stone, steel, and glass. Skyscrapers also shape time. Elevators divide day into floors. Lobbies funnel crowds, security gates filter, schedules align. The building itself becomes clock, organizing life by vertical rhythm. And rhythm itself is power. The skyline is also story of inequality. Luxury apartments float above clouds, lights glowing empty as investors' vaults. Below, workers stream, lives lived in shadow. Architecture here reminds not only of ambition, but of gap it creates. Height can inspire, but height can also exclude. Just as palace once did, skyscraper can both dazzle and distance. Yet their beauty remains undeniable. Glass catching sunrise. Towers piercing cloud. Reflections multiplying city itself. To stand before skyline at dusk is to feel modern or equal to or of cathedral once. Because architecture still persuades. Stone or glass, dome or spire, pyramid or tower. All whisper same truth. Power must be seen to be believed. And skyscrapers ensure it is seen. The lesson of skyscrapers is this: that modern empires live not in palaces, but in skylines. That power today is vertical. That ambition measured in height is as persuasive as ambition once measured in armies. And that though corporations rise and fall, nations shift and fade, the skyline remains. Shining, towering, intimidating, beautiful. Power written against the sky. Empires rise with confidence, build with pride, and rule with certainty. But no throne lasts forever. Time is patient. And when kings are gone, when armies disperse, when banners fade, stones remain. Ruins. Silent, broken, half buried, but still commanding. Because architecture does not surrender when empires do. It endures. It whispers. It teaches. Even in ruin, it speaks power. Consider the Colosseum in Rome. Once arena of thunder, now a hollow ring. Its arches shattered by earthquake, its stones stolen for palaces, its floor gone. Yet still it stands. Tourists walk its corridors, voices hushed. No emperor sits, no gladiator fights, no lion roars. But or remains. The ruin still commands, precisely because it endured defeat. Broken yet towering, it teaches that power written in stone outlives the hand that carved it. Cross continents to Cambodia. Angkor Wat. Once capital of Khmer Empire, filled with towers and terraces. Jungles reclaimed it. Roots coiled through walls, branches split roofs. But the stones still breathe. Carvings of dancers and gods survive beneath moss. Causeways stretch straight, even when half swallowed by forest. Tourists arrive, pilgrims return. the ruin became more powerful in abandonment than in rule. Because it became part of nature, blending empire with forest, human with eternal. Farther west, in desert canyons, lies Petra, city carved directly into cliffs. Facades rising like frozen curtains. Temples sculpted into rose-red stone. The Nabateans who built it are gone. The caravans that filled its markets long ended. Yet Petra still commands. Silence deepens its grandeur. Because stone carved into earth itself cannot be erased. The city may be empty, but the architecture remains audience to its own memory. Machu Picchu too. Abandoned, rediscovered, never destroyed. Terraces cling, walls stand, temples align with sun. The empire gone, but the mountain city still lifts hearts. The ruin is not weakness. It is resilience. The fact that it outlasted conquest, storm, time, makes it stronger. Even older ruins speak. Stonehenge in England. Half stones fallen, half still upright, circle incomplete. Yet still, people gather, still they watch solstice sun align with its stones. Its power is not in perfection, but in endurance. That after thousands of years, it still holds place in memory. That ruin itself became ritual. Why do ruins endure in power? Because they remind us of time's patience. Because they show that human effort, even when broken, leaves mark greater than empire's noise. Because they whisper humility. A king once ruled here. Now wind does. But stone still remembers. Ruins intimidate differently. Not with force, but with silence. Not with command, but with endurance. To stand before broken arch is to realize the fragility of rulers and the strength of stone. That power, when written into architecture, survives in ways armies cannot. Even cities alive carry ruins. In Athens, Parthenon still crowns hill. Columns fractured, roof gone, yet commanding. In Cairo, pyramids stand beyond modern streets. Tombs emptied, yet eternal. In Mexico, Teotihuacan stretches with avenues and pyramids long after its people vanished. All ruins, all still teaching. That stones remember what rulers forget. Tourists today take photographs, scholars measure, archaeologists dig. But beyond study, ruins still persuade. They inspire, or without armies, respect without crowns. Their power is memory. And memory endures longer than command. The lesson of ruins is this: that architecture, once breathed with power, continues to breathe even in silence. That brokenness does not erase authority. It transforms it. That the Colosseum, Angkor, Petra, Machu Picchu, Parthenon, pyramids, all whisper same truth. Empires fade. Stones remain. And in remaining, they still rule. Night gathers over stones. The sun sinks, Shadows stretch long across ruined walls, across palaces and pyramids, across broken amphitheaters and silent temples. But the stones do not grow quiet. They still whisper. For architecture never dies entirely. Even when roof falls, even when columns break, even when vines reclaim walls. The memory lingers, the shape remains, the lesson continues. Stones still speak. They speak of ambition, of pharaohs who raised pyramids so their names would not fade, of kings who built fortresses to intimidate, of emperors who raised arches to declare victory, of popes who built cathedrals to command faith, of rulers who built palaces so vast that courtiers became prisoners of splendor. Each stone still holds ambition of its maker. And when you walk among them, you feel that ambition breathing still. They speak of endurance. Walls of Rome still line streets. Columns of Athens still crown Acropolis. Great Wall still rides mountain ridges. Even when empires collapsed, stones endured. They remind us that power written in material lasts longer than power written in decree. That laws may vanish, armies may dissolve, but a bridge or dome can outlive all. They speak of obedience. Courtyards of Forbidden City still teach hierarchy. Domes of capital still remind citizens of law's grandeur. Skylines of glass and steel still bend necks upward. Architecture trains body without words. A wide plaza slows step. A tall spire lifts gaze. A gate narrows passage and demands pause. Obedience is choreographed, not shouted. Stones still teach obedience, centuries later. They speak of beauty. Stained glass still glows in cathedrals. Marble of Taj still blushes pink at dawn. Gardens of Versailles still ripple with fountains and geometry. Even when faith shifts, even when monarchy falls, beauty persuades anew. Tourists, strangers, pilgrims, all lower voices, all linger, all surrender briefly. Because beauty is power that never needs crown. They speak of humility. Ruins remind us that no empire lasts. That every throne is temporary, every palace one day cracks, every tower one day falls. The Colosseum broken, yet still immense. Anchor reclaimed, yet still sacred. Petra empty, yet still commanding. Stones whisper, nothing endures forever. And yet, something always does. They speak of continuity. Modern capitals still borrow domes of Rome, columns of Greece. Skyscrapers still echo spires, only taller, in steel instead of stone. Every age repeats language of architecture. Because stones speak clearly, and rulers listen. Continuity is power, and architecture is its grammar. They speak of us. For when we walk among them, we join their story. We read pyramids as ambition, cathedrals as devotion, walls as defense, gardens as control, skyscrapers as modern pride. But we also add our own meaning. A tourist's photograph, a pilgrim's prayer, a lover's sigh, a child's question. Architecture endures because it is never finished. We continue to listen, and in listening, the stones continue to speak. And tonight, as you rest, their voices follow gently. They do not command, they do not intimidate. They simply remind. That power changes, but patterns endure. That rulers fade, but memory lingers. That stones whisper, always, across centuries. And as you close your eyes, you too can let them speak softly. Not as burden, not as weight, but as comfort. For stones tell us that nothing is truly lost. That even when broken, even when silent, the world remembers. And memory is enough. So let the stones rest now. Let the pyramids glow faint under stars. Let the cathedrals dim as candles die. Let the walls stretch into shadow. Let the palaces fall quiet, their corridors empty, their mirrors dark. Let the skyscrapers flicker, their lights one by one fading into night. And let you, too, rest. For power never truly vanishes. It only changes form. And tonight, the stones keep their watch. Silent, enduring, whispering. Until morning. Until another story begins.